The coyote's cry of warning started off the entire pack. Listening to the way the howls changed, but not understanding why, Catherine said, "How do you know?" "Shh." Not taking his eyes off their surroundings, he reached out, found her shoulder, pushed her none too gently down behind the timber. Aside from the distant howling of the coyotes, the night was quiet again. Then, one of the horses in the corral shook its head and blew air through its nostrils. For a man who knew how to read them, it was another warning sign. He turned his head slowly, focused on a spot just to one side of the corral, knowing he would see more from the edge of his vision than he would if he looked directly at his objective. Nothing moved, except the horses, and they stamped and shifted restlessly. Then, a shadow detached itself from beside the wagon next to the corral. The shadow of a man. He ghosted across the lease, hugging something close to his chest as he moved in a curious crouch walk. Catherine caught her breath. The man was heading for the engine house. O'Brien jacked his shell into the Winchester. The sound was magnified by the silence. As the man in the center of the lease stopped dead, O'Brien yelled, "That's far enough!" Twisting, the man brought up and fired a handgun at the sound of O'Brien's voice. Even as the bullet smacked into the far side of the stacked timber, O'Brien brought the Winchester stock to his cheek, snap-aimed, and dropped hammer. As O'Brien's bullet hit the dynamite the man had been carrying, the deadly mixture of nitroglycerin, absorbent earth, and sodium carbonate went off with a deep bellow of sound. The man himself vanished in a fireball without even time to scream, and a wave of furnace heat blasted out in all directions. Catherine screamed. For a split second, night turned into day, and the ground tipped beneath them. O'Brien ducked, covered Catherine, dropped the Winchester, and folded his arms over his head as the sound of the detonation slammed at them. Seconds later, he was up again, in time to see a great burst of flame, white-orange at its heart, black and greasy on its underside, rise up into the night sky. Catherine began to rise. Snatching the Winchester back up, he told her to stay where she was. The dynamite was no surprise, leastways not to him. It had, after all, been Quillan's specialty. Temple had told him as much the day before. But that hadn't been Quillan out there just now, though. He wouldn't handle dirty work himself while he had others to do it for. Even as he thought it, the rest of Quillan's men, the 5 who'd been waiting out in the darkness for the dynamite man to place his sticks and blow the engine house, came galloping in out of the night, some firing handguns, the rest hurling flaming torches at every available target. At once the lease came roaring to life as the corralled horses began to circle even more nervously. Bud and Don pounded out of the dugout with weapons in hand. They took one look at the horsemen cantering through camp, then threw themselves behind cover and started about returning fire. A torch landed on the roof of the tent and the flames immediately took hold. Temple stumbled out into the night. Someone took a shot at him and he quickly threw himself down out of sight. Having hurled his torch into a pile of tarpaulins, one of Quillan's men turned his mount, dragged a Colt from its holster, and kneed his horse back to a run, firing wildly. First left, then right. O'Brien came up from behind the timber, tracked him, led him a little, and squeezed the trigger. The man rode straight into the bullet, and it clubbed him sideways out of his saddle, blood geysering from a wound where his right ear had been. Another rider went by and Don leveled his Moore & Company shotgun. Flames spat from one barrel and the recoil threw him back up a step. But the load, 1/12 of a pound of lead shot, backhanded the rider off the far side of his mount. The rider hit the ground hard and his hat came off. O'Brien saw by the light of the fires a flash of red hair and knew that this was Newton's companion, the one who'd vanished into the saloon's backyard with the intention of shooting him from ambush. He jacked in another round, fired at a man who came galloping to the redhead's aid, but Catherine chose that moment to grab at his legs, and the shot missed. The redhead staggered to his feet, his shredded arm hanging limp at his side, and his companion heaved him astride his horse before they both lit out into the surrounding darkness. Their surviving comrades were of the same mind, but Bishop wasn't about to let them get off that lightly. His fighting blood up again, he broke cover, planted himself in the center of the lease, and emptied his carbine into the escaping riders. He missed the one he'd been aiming at.